Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Soul Surgery Podcast. My name is Nikki Clinch, and I am your host. So today we are going to be sharing with you a beautiful, beautiful episode where I get to sit with, once again, the amazing teacher, the amazing authentic being, and modern day shaman, YaAcov Darling. So YaAcov is someone that has been in my world since I came into recovery from my addictions nearly 21 years ago now. He is the founder of Movement Medicine. He is the best-selling author of Jaguar in the Body, Butterfly in the Heart, and the amazing new book, Shaman Invoking Power, Purpose and Presence in the Core of Who You Are. He is acknowledged as a practicing shaman by the people who work in this world and many indigenous elder shamans and communities from the Arctic to the Amazon. YaAcov is an absolute committed stand for embodiment and integration of the wisdom and teachings from shamanism and how we can bring this into our everyday lives. How are we able to restore and evolve our connection to ourselves through these powerful teachings and practices? How can we deepen our connection to each other and to the power and beauty of nature and solving our interpersonal world issues in this process? In this episode, YaAcov and I dive deeply into the practice of initiation, the process and commitment to bringing shamanism and the teaching and the wisdoms of it into our everyday lives, and how that can serve us right now more than ever during COVID-19, during a pandemic. We speak about the stigmas and the myths and the fears that are commonly attached to shamanism and why that might be so. And really, we speak about education. We speak about how can we begin to educate ourselves and our children about something that is already inside of us, that this is not something to find or get or acquire. This is something that already lives within all of us. We've just not been educated in how to use it and how to live with it and how to be with it and how to dance with it in a way that empowers us and continues our evolution and our growth and our transformation. So it's a beautiful episode. If you are remotely interested in learning how to invoke the power within you, the shaman within you, not out there, in you, then please listen to this episode. YaAcov has so much wisdom to share. He speaks about how do we move our body? How do we clear what moves through us? How do we create spaciousness inside of us so that we can actually hear more deeply and that we can connect more deeply to our own internal wisdom and to Earth itself and the planet itself. So I'm going to stop babbling on and head over to this episode. If you have any big shifts or insights or aha moments during this episode, please do share with me where they are in the episode that it happened for you and what happened for you, because I love to hear about your healing. So you can DM me on Instagram, Nikki_Clinch, or you can send me an email through my website, nikkiclinch.com, or you can write a comment underneath the YouTube video and we will always reply. I just love to hear your healing. And if you love this episode, please do leave us a review, because your reviews really matter. Every single time one of you takes the effort and the time to leave a review for something here that has moved you, it benefits and it impacts this podcast. It allows this podcast to spread further and wider to more people, and hopefully help more and more people every day. So thank you for your generosity for leaving a review. And if you love this podcast and you want to get them every single week without fail, then please do subscribe. And we would just love to have you in the community. So enough from me. I'm going to head over to this episode. This is amazing, amazing wisdom ahead of you with YaAcov Darling on the Soul Surgery podcast. So, hello, YaAcov. Welcome to Soul Surgery again.
Thank you, Nikki. Good to be back.
Thank you for coming back. I knew that when I interviewed you the first time, I wanted to dive deeper into conversation with you. So it's wonderful to be here with you again. Yeah. First, let me start by asking you, how are you doing during this very intense time on the planet?
Very intense, yes. Indeed it is. I mean, I'm famous for saying I like intense, but I'm not sure I meant this. This is stratospherically intense.
Yes.
I've been traveling for 30 years, going around the world and connecting to communities. And this year, for a year now, I've been at home on our own land, really getting to know the feeling that I feel really compelled to come into a deeper relationship with the ground under my own feet. I feel I need much more ground. I'm doing much more of my own practice than I've ever done, because though I'm locked down with my beloved and her ponies and our little puppy and 5 chickens and a vegetable patch, and here we are living the good life. But I feel more connected to my fellow humans, to the biosphere, to the sense of anxiety and emotion that is at a level of intensity that I've not known before. You know, in my life, we've had a relatively stable existence in terms of I haven't had to go off to war anywhere, or, which most of my grandparents and great grandparents would have had to do. And they were refugees. They lived in the unknown. And the last 60 years have been relatively odd in comparison to the rest of human history in Europe and some parts of the world in terms of that stability. And so that intensity of being with the unknown on a daily basis, yes. I've really felt the need to be much more grounded, to be very engaged in my own practice. Like, my heart needs a lot of exercising. I dance a lot. I'm not, our practice is a lot about allowing what's present to take its shape in movement and be expressed in order to find a level of peace and presence. And I've been doing that a lot. It's a noisy time in the Darling Khan household.
I really relate to that. Just this much deeper commitment to our self practice, and like you, I'm amazed at the intensity of what I'm feeling and picking up on an emotional level and an energetic level. It just feels, I guess this is really the only time in history, and correct me if I'm wrong, where the whole planet, most of the whole planet, is going through the same experience all at once. So really, as a species, we are going through this experience, and that is a first, right? Well, I mean, we as a species are always going through an experience.
Yes. No, but you're right. There's a certain, I mean, in a way, I suppose that's one of the benefits, or the benefits. It's very difficult to talk about a benefit of a pandemic, but the sense of where it's happening, where there is collaboration between, across borders, and us as a species kind of going, oh, this, I can't just close the door on my country.
No.
I,
We
you know,
have to find a way to communicate and
this
work
is
together.
us. This is us. This is us, and it's the biosphere, and it's like, where's this coming from? And
Yeah.
you know, we're being shaken and stirred, and
Mm.
it's
Mm.
it's a real initiatory time. Susanna's my beloved. We were talking on last night, Wednesday night. God, you see, even a day feels so long.
Yes.
We were talking about recognizing that we feel we're in an initiation. We're in a time of initiation right now, of really having to face things that we haven't had to face before.
Yes.
And you know, initiations, there's always pressure. Like birth is an initiation. When we take our first steps, when we become a young man or a young woman, when we fall in love, or when we make love for the first time, or when we meet somebody. There's life is a series of initiations all the way through to death. But I feel
Yes.
like this is a collective initiation that we are being asked to question who we are and what really matters to us.
Yes.
Those of us that actually have any time, you know, because there's so many people who are just on the front lines surviving. But
Yes.
you know, I feel very blessed. I'm very lucky where I am. And although I don't know about you, but I've never worked harder either.
I've never worked harder. Me too. No, it's been nonstop since March 2020. I'm
Yes,
the same.
yes,
So you speak about initiation, and when I hear you speak about that, I mean, I really hear the depth and the power of that process, and I also know it myself. But I feel like most of, or a lot of the modern world, or a lot of modern society, you know, we've forgotten how to initiate or how to even honor or be in this process, because we've kind of lost those rituals. You know, you were initiated as the shaman.
Mm. Well, I basically I had 3 decades of initiation, really, before I could comfortably sit with the identification of shaman. And it wasn't something that I stood up one day and said, "Hey, I'm a shaman." It was a long and still is at times very difficult, challenging journey, as any kind of awakening or initiation is. You know, the purpose of initiation is that we meet our own limitation, like we meet the edge of the known
Yeah.
inside us and in our environment, and then we're in interaction with that unknown, and in that interaction we get the opportunity to discover more of who we are.
Yes.
And you know, so it's not that there should be some point we would evolve beyond this. It's a continual thing, a bit like the way a tree grows. You know,
Mm.
every year that trunk just goes another ring, and it grows into a space
Mhm.
it wasn't before. We were like this, and then the seasons come round, and we're weathered, and then vroom, we've grown a circle. We've
Yes.
we've we've embraced something more of ourselves
Mhm.
in the challenge of the unknown. And I
Mm.
feel like that's in order to do that and not be overwhelmed, because if you don't have resources, the chances are that you'll feel very overwhelmed by what's going on.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I think that's why we're working so hard. We're like, hey guys, you know, you could try this or you could try that. This helps. You know,
Yeah.
we do a meditation every now and again for free. We just call it Shake It Out.
Yeah.
And where you just, you know, put on some music and let your body rock it out and release all of that extra energy from the body and remember. So
Yes.
yeah, resilience, resource, practice.
Yes.
You need that to deal with an initiation. In tribal societies, you prepared for an initiation. You knew it
Yes.
was coming and you prepared for it. And even then, even when you knew it was coming, still at that moment where you step into it, you step into the unknown.
Yes.
And here we are.
Yeah, I feel like, more and more people are just being invited to stand on the edge, and without real education of knowing what's possible. For me, having come through addiction and all the sort of deaths and rebirths that I've had to live through in my life, I've been able to develop a certain amount of trust on the edge and in the unknown. But that it does, if you haven't had that before, it is like a death. And I've been thinking a lot about the process of birth. There's a point when we mothers are birthing, just before the baby is born, when you hit transition and it literally feels like you're gonna die. And then at that moment, poof, birth happens. And that's kind of why I'm seeing so much panic and chaos and terror, because we're being pushed to the edge. And so I guess the invitation in your work is, when you look at your work as shamanism and the rituals and the teachings that you have and you've learned and you pass on, I mean, never has there ever been a more relevant time to start learning these things.
I'm one of my my professional passion or my vocation is to help people to recognize the resources that they are. It's not that we need resources. We are resources. We are earth. We are sunlight. We are water. We are moving, breathing, airy beings, and we're purely elemental. But if you don't pay attention to your physical body because your education has taught you that you need to just think about everything, or that the only real reality is that which we can measure and that which we can predict, it's very hard when you're thrown into a situation like this. But the good news is it's not difficult to learn simple, useful practices that have real effect on our capacity to, to be with the unknown. Thank you for sharing that incredible image of that transition time at birth. I was really, when you were talking, I was right back with my wife in the tub and watching that moment. Honestly, I've never seen anything like it. I wasn't
Yeah.
prepared, let alone her. I was just like, she just were transformed. It was like a Hollywood special effects movie, just unbelievable to watch that power of the will for life just come through that body. And then this beautiful boy who's now 29 years old. And
Wow.
amazing. So,
That's amazing.
I wanted to kiss every woman's feet I saw after that experience, not least my wife's, which I did. And, yeah.
Yes. Oh, so I've spoken to you a few times, and we've communicated, quite a few times over this pandemic in particular. And I've been following your work for years, decades, 20 years now, I think it's been. But I've never really asked you, like, how did you? What's your story? How did you end up teaching and living this life and being initiated into the work and into shamanism? How did this begin for you?
Well, as a child, I was a real dreamer. And, in fact, I couldn't wait to get to bed at night because
Hmm.
my dreams were so much more real to me than my waking life, and so much
Okay.
more interesting, and so much more um, free in a sense. And that was kind of difficult because, here I was living in a body trying to learn how to be human.
Hmm.
And of course, like any teenager, I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be one of the people. So I pushed away my um, natural inclination towards the imaginal world, or the world of the unseen. Like, for years as a child, I used to do this meditation. Nobody ever taught it to me. And of course, I didn't know it was a meditation either. It's just what I did, where I would
Hmm.
lie in the bed. So, like, God, is it bedtime yet? Is it time for bed? Yes, it's bedtime. Great, get me to bed. And then lying in my
You're like the dream child.
I know. I'm sure I wasn't in many other ways. But there I was, like, get me to bed. And then I would lie in the bed and I would just start to drop through the layers. So I'd feel my body, my bed, the house, my family, the street, the town, the county, the continent, the world. And then I'd keep expanding out until I could feel it in my body now, that feeling of expanse where my thumbs could tickle the stars.
Wow.
And that was my entry point into dreams. And I always asked the same question in that place, which was, well, I'm Jewish. My whole family's Jewish. I was born Jewish. I was brought up Jewish. I wanted to be a rabbi when I was young. And I would always ask at that point, my rabbi tells me that God created all of this. And I was like, well, that's great, wonderful. But what's much more interesting than that is, where did God come from?
Wow.
Like, if there was nothing, like if there was nothing and then suddenly there was God, like, where did that come from? And if there was nothing and suddenly there was everything, like, that question it's the key to the mystery for me. And I've always loved that feeling of the unknown, the mystery. I've been in love with it my whole life. Like, to be in that place where there aren't any answers. There's just the question and the experience. And so anyway, I pushed it all aside because I wanted to go to the football match and play sport, and wanted to be cool, and, not some kind of weird, tripped out psychopath. I wanted to be like just a normal human being, please. And it was very difficult because I just wasn't the same as my friends. I didn't have the same interests. So I always felt a bit on the edge in a way. I got on much better with adults than with people my own age. And then, anyway, in my early 20s, I was out on a golf course playing golf with a mate, and a storm came over. And I put up the umbrella, stupid thing to do, with a golf umbrella with a metal tip in a storm. And next thing I knew, he'd been thrown off me. And I felt like a tent peg that had been literally banged into the ground. And I was like, wow, God, I could be dead now. And that meeting with my own mortality at a young age, it brought everything, as death does. It brought everything right into focus. It's like, okay, you could be dead. What matters to you, YaAcov? What actually is? And I started to remember all the kinds of experiences I'd had as a kid, like the kind of dreaming, the contact with my great grandmother after she died, all those kinds of things. And I started to seek out understanding. Like, is there any language for this? Are there any other people who have these experiences? And then I found shamanism. And the second I found shamanism, I was like, oh, like this has been going on forever. Like there's loads of people who have this kind of experience. It's not even that weird. It's like, oh, there's a whole, not just in my country, but everywhere in the world there's been shamanic practice, that sense of inquiry through, like, why am I here? What's my relationship to this physical existence? What's the relationship between my dreams and my capacity to imagine and my ability to create in form in this world? And that's been my fascination. And then, I've had a whole journey with lots and lots of wonderful teachers and mentors who, smashed me to pieces often. And
as they do, as a good teacher does.
Oh God, honestly, I mean, really, I don't know if you notice, Nikki, but I notice that the more I go on, the more embarrassing my own self-revelations get. I'm astonished by how unconscious I am.
I'm amazed at how many blind spots there are, and they're never ending.
Never ending. But that's why we need each other, isn't it? And that's why, again, the indigenous people that I've been blessed to work with, there is such a thing as elders, people who've really investigated life and done their own healing work and faced their own challenges and been through initiation after initiation. I have many friends and family in the Amazon, and that tradition is hardcore. It's really intense.
Yes,
they send their shamans who are being initiated out into the forest on their own for weeks, and just to live and then, be in that what's that? It's like a fine, balanced edge between the physical world and the spirit world. Because that's what the shaman does, is they bridge this world of imagination with this physical body and this earth and this biosphere and this imagination and this dream and this capacity to be connected through time and space with our ancestors and our descendants, and to feel that we're part of something, that we're not these isolate molecules locked up inside ourselves. We're a creative part of an extraordinary creative universe. And we have a role to play. So, our work is very simple. It just invites people to stand up inside themselves, really to stand up for who we are, to grow up, which means to take responsibility for who we are. And I know you've written about this in your beautiful book about, like, how do you stop playing at being the victim of life. I'm not talking about, you know what I mean. There are genuine victims. There are genuine persecutors. I'm talking about what we do to ourselves with things that happened 50 years ago. And how we hold ourselves in shape, or there isn't enough support or resource to help us to be carried through some kind of transformation. And it's that time, isn't it? We need that. We need each other, and we need our elders, and we need all kinds of brilliance, scientific brilliance, definitely. Spiritual brilliance, emotional brilliance, creative brilliance in terms of, how we can live more sustainably. And we have it within us as a species. We are brilliant.
I believe that. I think that's one of the reasons why I got in touch with you when the pandemic hit, it just occurred to me more and more how much I needed to have wisdom around me, and wisdom is something that is lived and learned through living, rather than more knowledge. And of course, knowledge is so useful, but just having more and more of that wisdom of people who have lived before me. And I just think all of us need each other in that way. You speak about the indigenous, you speak about, the tribes. This is part of their being in the world. And when I hear you speak about that, I hear education, as I spent some time with the Shipibo, and even when the baby is in the womb, the parents can already know whether the baby is meant to be a curandero. And so they will be born into a ceremony of what their wisdom is and what their purpose is. And so their life is, their skills and their magic and their healing powers are nurtured from the day they're born. But you see, we are kind of no different. We, like you, I was the same, and there are many others who are born with this ability, and many, actually, I think all of us have some kind of ability to connect beyond the mind, connect beyond the stories, and start to really intricately connect to life, the life force. But we're just not educated in a way to honor this and celebrate this and strengthen this and to trust it.
That's so true, and it's very sad. I notice as you're talking, I feel that sense of sadness of how far the industrial world has moved away from that kind of knowledge. We've developed another kind of intelligence to absolute brilliance. And I know many of our friends in the Amazon, they tell us that the way that we're going to get through this time is by bringing together the best of all wisdom, whether it's scientific, therapeutic, systems theory, all these brilliant ways of seeing how we can be in a more harmonious relationship with ourselves, with each other, with across tribes and cultures and different belief systems. That's absolutely key, because we've got into this ridiculous polarized state of, I know I'm right and I know you're wrong, and I'm going to stop listening to you because you're different than me and you have a different story. And we're creating such ongoing suffering with that story. And again, it's from a lack of resource, of self-knowledge, like to know what we feel, to know that what we feel has intelligence. Our fear has intelligence.
Yeah.
It's not, when I see those people wearing those no fear hats, I'm like, well, I think of Temple Grandin, who wrote an amazing book called Animals in Translation. She's a high functioning, autistic, amazing woman. And she says, a wild animal without fear is pretty soon a dead animal.
Yes.
Fear says, hey, pay attention, wake up, look around you, check. But if we are full of past fear, we don't know how to tell whether the fear we're experiencing is now or whether it's then. And we have to learn. We have to learn these skills. This is should be as basic as learning to talk.
Yep.
Is learning to listen. It's about listening.
Yes.
I think that's the key right now, is to learn how to be here and listen and sense, like, what's happening in me. And how can I, here we are, I'm in Devon, you're in New Zealand, we're having this conversation, and how can we really connect and feel, as soon as I give my attention to you in that way, I feel you so much more strongly in my heart. And these are just simple skills we can learn. It's not, I hate to think of shamanism as some kind of romantic mystique that's somehow very far away from anything that's real. If I live in the city, how can shamanism be of any use to me? What difference does it make what the Shipibo or the Jaguar or what they're doing? I'm living in a high-rise flat in the city. Like what shamanism got to do with me? But it can be so helpful because one of the things that shamanism does is it invites us to become indigenous within our own skin, our own territory, our own land, our own garden. It helps us to land and take ownership of. And, I hear a lot of misunderstanding about, indigenous people say you can't own land and you can't own land. It's not true. The indigenous people do own their land. They absolutely do. They just have a different understanding for the word ownership. Like ownership means take care of, means be responsible for.
Yes.
And it's different. So we need to take ownership of our land, like take it back from, those aches and pains and patterns and ways of breathing and holding that are unconsciously retelling of our own history. And our work is about listening to the level where you connect with something that is just the pure unbroken intelligence of life, which is movement. And then you allow that intelligence that is living the body to hold and bring into movement, bring into consciousness. All these things that arise are like, I'm afraid. But if I'm afraid and I'm in my body and I can move with fear and I can let it be exciting and let that move me and not clamp up and freeze and flight, if I can move and breathe, then I'm paying attention. And we have to, these are such basic things that we could teach our kids in school that would make this world such a more enjoyable place for everybody.
Yes. Wow. Gosh, I totally stand for that one. So tell me, why are people so suspicious of shamanism and shamans?
Well,
I think there's this kind of a picture about it, isn't there? That if you're not educated and there's this kind of idea of what that is or what that means, and that there is a suspicion about it. So why do you think that is?
Well, we do have a history with shamanism in all the different cultures. In Europe, shamanism was attacked; it was nearly destroyed. All the traditions. I mean, they either went underground or they were actually broken. So you only have in Europe. You have to go back to the terrible time where to be at all different, put your life in danger, to some kind of strange idea of justice through the church and through the courts that could say if you wrote with your left hand or you knew which herbs were good for your body, that somehow you were a witch and therefore you should be put to death. And, if you're a mother in that situation and you've got daughters who are, then you've got to make sure they hide that or suppress it, put it away. There's the repercussion of fear that put into our systems. That's one side of it. The other side of it is like in any vocation, there's been, and there are a lot of shamans out there who are not really interested in your well-being at all. They're just interested in their own power and, bank balance. And there's a lot of, as in any tradition, there's a lot of charlatans and who, weekend shamans. I did a few weekends. I did 10 ceremonies. That's it. I'm a shaman now. It's there's a lot of bad practice. There's not an association of shamans where we can hold each other to account for our professional standards, which would be there is in Siberia. There's a professional association, which is wonderful. I was amazed to hear that. And so I think, we have a lot of fear attached to it. There's the idea of madness, that, I'm going mad if I start to see things or hear things. That's the first step to madness, which it can be if you don't have guidance.
Yes.
So there's a lot of stories and a lot of, in my own journey, I had to do a lot of working out to just let shamanism be kind of ordinary and everyday. It's just what I do,
Yes. I think also, as I'm hearing you, and I experience similar in my work as well, which is not that dissimilar actually. And there's a lot of shamanism in the way that I live and teach. And, I think also a lot of the fear or the suspicion that comes is because if you're really going to commit to this process, and it is a way of being, it's a way of living, it's a training in itself in how you live your life as a human being on this earth. It requires to face both the shadow and the light. It requires to dive deep into the shadow. And I think, again, with education, we get educated to, at all costs, fix and tidy up and manage the shadow. And of course, then we're not really welcoming the whole being that we are and the whole of human life.
Yeah. Sounds scary, doesn't it? It sounds like, oh my God, I've got to face my shadow, but it's not really scary. It's really fascinating and interesting and very human. There's something that's very human about our total imperfection.
Yes.
Presentation that I ought to be all worked out and all perfect and all right, all good and I'm sorry, I'm just not. I'm just a human being. And I have all kinds of things that need to be acknowledged and digested. And if I turn away from something or deny something, I'm giving it more strength.
Yes.
Whereas if some indigenous traditions teach their kids in nightmares to go back into the nightmare and go back up to that scary monster and say, hello, you're in my dream. Who are you?
Wow.
Actually.
That just gave me shivers. That's so powerful.
Kids, I remember our son woke up from a nightmare once and I said, oh, go back into the dream and go and walk up to that and say, you're in my dream. And who are you? And he woke up in the morning. I said, did you go back in? He said, yeah, I did. How was it? Oh, it was good. Thank you. No, it was very matter of fact, which is what it should be.
Yes,
it should be just matter of fact. And then we learn that life is a series of these kind of meeting with what's unknown in us, what's unknown in another, in the other people we meet, what's unknown in the world, and how do we dance with that in a way that's creative, grounded, kind, where we uplift each other a bit and say, hey, Nikki, I love it that you tell your stories and you share all your beautiful imperfections of your journey and you acknowledge the addictions that you lived through. And, there's so much that I've lived through that it's just the the underbelly of being a human being, greed and jealousy and dishonesty and all these things that we have to face and make choices about. I,
Yes.
I have to say one more thing. If I may, I realized at the beginning of this pandemic, I got such a teaching. I'd been living so fast and so running around, like, off to South Africa, do a workshop, come home 3 days, go to Israel, teach, come back, go to America, like just this crazy fast existence. And I recognized just how profligate I'd been, just how wasteful, because I was so in that speed of working so hard. I felt that I deserved something special to praise myself because I'd been working so hard. So I should have now another new jumper or a pair of shoes or a night in an expensive hotel or a blah, 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 blah. Like, because I need to feed myself because I'm working so hard. But it's just like I'm in the consumption game.
Yes.
And it was so humbling to look in our cupboards and see what our kitchen cupboards were like when we didn't have time to really relish and take care of and enjoy the food we had. It's like, oh, I haven't got time to see what we've got. I need to go and do the shopping. Let's buy a whole lot more, shove it in the cupboard, and we'll eat what we can when we can. It was embarrassing, as I mentioned, that to come to terms with and just go, oh, I've been part of that, living at that speed and doing that kind of damage that not paying attention does.
Yes.
And, so I'm really grateful that I've been given this opportunity to become a little bit more basically grateful, acknowledge the goodness of what I'm given,
Yes.
to taste it, to enjoy my food, to not run through life like I'm trying to get somewhere.
Well, thank you for sharing that beautiful human humility and truth. That's one of the reasons why we ended up moving. I realized, and I share about it on the podcast, that all these things that I thought I needed to be somebody and that I had to be somebody just got stripped away when the pandemic hit. And I started to realize my own arrogance and my own ego of just the way that I was living my life. And life just got more and more simple. And in the simplicity, I realized, gosh, we don't need that much. And what we do need, is nature, and, a deeper connection to the land, and family. And that was kind of when we decided that it was time to leave London, because I realized the life I had created there was actually part of feeding this somebody that I thought I had to be. It was very humbling, and in that humility of looking at myself, as you speak about. And I want to say this for everyone listening: it's not easy to look at yourself in this way. It's not easy to look at, even when you've done so much work on yourself and you find these parts of yourself and you're like, oh, I've been really arrogant. I've been really egotistical, and to look with such honesty. My teacher always talks about radical honesty, and to inquire and to learn from it, and then to see what can shift from it. But by looking at our own selves in that way, the peace and the gratitude that comes with, I feel emotional talking about it. I feel the more that I look at the parts that I can't bear, even for myself to see, let alone share it with anyone else, the softer I become, the more open my heart becomes, and the humbler I feel. And in that, there's a deeper connection to each other. to earth, I just realized actually we're all really similar
Yes.
beneath all the layers.
Yeah, basic animals, with a rather enlarged neocortex.
Yes, exactly. We're all really similar. We have all these animalistic reactions. We're animals, and we use so much of our life force to suppress these things, and that's where so much suffering happens. And then we just disconnect and we move fast. And that's what's happened for me. So I get that humility, and I also just honoring how much courage it takes to keep looking.
Well, absolutely, and let's put a little word in for a sense of humor about the whole thing as well, because I do. Thank goodness that there are very, very tender and sore moments on any initiatory journey, on any journey inward or to self-knowledge. There are painful moments. There's no way around that. We're going to cry and howl and shout and feel like victims of life and feel furious, and we're going to go through the whole thing. And the best thing that we can do is dance. And then what we have discovered is that there comes to be this sense of humor. We have these friends who are 20 years older than us. They're in their 70s, and they are, they really have grown old disgracefully, and they're continuing to do so. And they tell me they have the best sex of their lives, and he's 76 and she's 73. And I'm like, great, good. That's a harvest worth fighting for.
Yes, that's amazing.
It is amazing. You don't hear it so often, do you? And the whole thing is about being real. And when I first met them, we had started having conversations. They would laugh about these things about each other that I would find really tender, and I'd be like, God, are these guys all right? Are they not? They're laughing about this stuff. Are they all right? Maybe they just don't realize how tender it is. And I kind of asked them. That made them laugh twice as hard. They were like, we understand, but honestly, there is a time when it really gets to be funny, where you see your own trips, you see them like acting out, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm still playing that one. I'm still playing it, still playing that old movie. and, but there is a harvest, and I think that's very important for to share with the people listening now. It's worth it. I know for me, the harvest of being willing to do the hard miles at times, and I find that with my beloved Susanna, we're together 34 years, and we are what we are discovering in this space of being together this year. Because we've been together, but we've been like this, come close together, intensity, go off, do our things, come back together. And now we've been like locked in our place and with each other, learning to live with each other. And thank God for the dance, and thank God for a sense of humor, and for practice and all the work we've done, because otherwise we might have killed each other. And I know there is a lot of violence that goes on because people don't know what to do with all that emotion. Don't know what to do with it. People get so full. But the harvest is worth it. The harvest of where you like the peace that comes, as you described it, of when I've acknowledged something, a little bit less sexy than being, an international rock star shaman. When I kind of acknowledge something a little bit more like, God, I'm just not kind enough to you. I don't. I notice that I'm not celebrating you. I'm telling myself a story about how hard I'm working, but I'm not noticing how you've got your shoulder to the wheel, and we're pushing this thing up the hill together, called let's survive this pandemic in the most creative way we can and be of use in the best way we can. And when I turn and actually look and notice and share it, it's like the blossoming that happens when we, again, it's to do with listening. If I'm not full up of all the tension of the day and all the worries and all my past and all my ancestors and all my who I should be, if I'm not full of all that, if I have a way of emptying out, then I can listen to me and to you and to this, and we can get to know each other and get to discover the miracle that we're here at all. It's a miracle. It's very unlikely that life happened on this planet. It's ridiculous. You actually think about it. Your hands are made of material that came from the nuclear furnace of exploding stars billions of years ago. That's a physical fact. This is just simply so. It's ridiculous that we get to have evolved into this. And what a blessing. Like, what can I do with it? What can I do with my life? And what makes sense to me? Really, what makes sense to my being? And that's the journey that I feel like I call that archetype the inner shaman, that has a particular way of being able to do that, to braid together our past, our present, and our future, our body, our heart, and our mind, the recognition of the soul we are, the fact that we're interconnected, to braid together all these threads so that we become who we are. And when we are who we are, it's not that we need to try to connect. We are connected. We know we're connected. We know we are this earth. We know that our health depends on the health of the earth. We know that if we don't breathe clean air, our lungs will pack up in the end. We know that the lungs are the forest and the trees and the root systems and the mycelium, and we start to recognize that we're just part of this extraordinary intelligence. And the inner shaman knows that. They are a weaver, a braider, a dreamer of imagination and physical reality into something that makes sense to who we are.
Beautiful. You speak poetry. It's absolutely beautiful. Thank you for speaking that, and very moving to hear. So last question, how can people hearing this and anyone who gets the gift of catching this content, how can people integrate these teachings, shamanism, into their life, everyday life today during COVID, in this edge that we're in? How can they integrate it? How can they work with you? How can they learn from you more? Can you share that with us?
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, we have a whole bunch of free resources that we made for this time, and that are practices. In fact, Susanna's about to do one now in a few minutes. So we're doing these freebies. But if you look on www.2121gratitudes.com, you'll find a whole bunch of things. We've got a membership site, which is super cheap, per month where we're offering teachings. There's a bunch of free resources there. There are courses for self-study, and there are live online workshops as well for this time. And they're right across the board in terms of cost and value, and from free to more exclusive closed group things that we do. And do come and seek us out. There's my books, Movement Medicine and Jaguar in the Body, Butterfly in the Heart, and the recent one is called Shaman Invoking Power, Purpose and Presence, at the core of who you are. Same publisher as you, and we've made a whole bunch of music as well. You can find there at 21 Gratitudes. There's a whole lot there, and
beautiful.
I hope that we get to live beyond a pandemic and that we're able to dance in the room again together sometime. But in the meantime, I just give thanks to the creative genius human beings who created this technology that allows us to experience connection in this way. And if it's what we've got, let's make the best of it. Let's use this time and learn some really good, interesting stuff that will help us to flourish when the doors open and we can run out into the next version of the roaring 20s. After that last pandemic, we had the roaring 20s. Can you imagine it? How we're going to dance together? How we're going to run each other's arms and go, we need to dance together and hug. And
that's going to be one big, amazing dance ceremony. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Just such an honor to sit with you again. Thank you for gifting us with your time and your heart and your wisdom. I love having these conversations with you, YaAcov. I don't know whether I've ever told you this, but when I came into my recovery from my addiction when I was 20, you were one of the first teachers that I came across in your movement medicine. And I started dancing, and that was just, I couldn't believe what I had stumbled across, coming out of addiction, coming out of such a suffering place, to suddenly discover the absolute medicine of moving my body beyond the mind. And I found my heart there, and I learned how to move with my emotions and what moved through me, which was a lot. And so I just wanted to thank you for that. I kind of grew up knowing your wisdom and learning from you. So it's just so beautiful to be able to sit here and have these conversations.
Thank you. I do want to say that's for anyone, that's always the deepest pleasure, to know that you've been of use, that your life has been of some kind of value. So it's a beautiful gift you give me. And I'll take it and share it with Susanna. And it's so wonderful to see you flourishing and strong and beautiful. Like, what a strong and beautiful woman and mama, and lovely to see you with that nature. I remember talking to you when you were in London and how hemmed in you felt, and now look at you. You're a dreamer, and you are all power to you, Nikki, and all success.
Thank you so much. So everybody listening to this, all the details for YaAcov and all his amazing programs and every way that you can work with him is going to be in the captions below. You'll get all the details below. But just thank you. Thank you again. This is going to help a lot of people.
Well, thank you. And I wish you and all your listeners and all your families, everyone, be well and be safe, and, know that you have this inner shaman in you that has so much medicine, your medicine, for you and your life. And maybe we'll meet somewhere. Thank you.